40th issue launch. Thanks so much for coming. It's a really This has been a really long week for me. It's one of those weeks where, well, the first thing that happened was I dropped my phone in the toilet.
Oh no!
So that was, yeah. How many people have done that out of curiosity?
I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Oh, go on. Yeah, okay.
While I was sitting on it.
Oh, while you were sitting on it. Yeah, that's rough. I'm sorry. Well, that's good. So I'm in good company. I'm feeling better already. It's going to be a really good night. We have really great readers. You're going to have a lot of fun. My name is Mary Cole. I'm the editor-in-chief of Ducts magazine. I also run the Trumpet Fiction series, which you're at tonight. Just in case you've never heard of Ducts magazine before, a little bit about us. It's spelled D-U-C-T-S, not like ducks, quack, quack. And it's at ducts.org. Our new issue is up, like I said, it came out in December, so you can hear all the stories tonight, you can read them there again, you can read the other stories. If you would like to be on our newsletter, we publish our issue twice a year. You can sign up for it there. You can also sign up for the Trumpet Fiction series newsletter. Basically, we just let you know once a month who our readers are going to be. It's always the second Saturday of every month from October through June here at the KGB. Always free. We have a lot of different genres, a lot of different writers that we cover, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you're a writer, please submit to us. We're open for submissions right now, so you can go onto our website and find out more about that. In April, we're actually doing a Trumpet Fiction a National Poetry Month celebration, so that's going to be exclusively poetry. So please keep that in mind. We're going to have 2 readers first, then we're going to have a little 10 minutes so we can freshen our drinks, and we'll come back for 2 more readers. Probably just get us rolling. Our first piece is going to be a humor piece, and the writer of it is actually, he lives in Canada, which as our performer here is going to remind us, it's probably colder, or probably, we decided earlier, it's probably warmer in Canada now than it is here, so he probably made a great decision of not coming to read. He took his first steps in Antwerp, Belgium, and grew up in British Columbia, Canada. He was born without borders. Thinking outside the box is part of his makeup. Ken, I'm just realizing I did not prepare a bio for you. It probably went down the toilet with my phone. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Mary. By Nolan Janssens. Chapter 1. A catchy first sentence. I saw the world, but not by choice. Chapter 2. The gas station. Red was the first to go. She ended up in the hands of one of our regular customers, a trucker with ride or die tatted on his neck. Little Blue ended up with a precocious hippie carrying a fake ID. For me, I ended up with a soccer mom. I thought it was one of the lucky $1.30 lighters. I was wrong. So very wrong. I was finally out of the gas station. The life of watching kids steal bags of Doritos and studded condoms was behind me. Why always the studded ones? Chapter 3, Suburbia. The soccer mom's name was Victoria. She drove me to my new home in her Honda Odyssey. Of course, she drove a Honda Odyssey. Vicky, darling, I love what you've done here, Sharon said as soon as we walked in the house. Victoria's friends called her Vicky. Really? The 3 bouncy castles aren't too much, Vicky asked. No, not at all. Billy's so lucky to have you as a mother. All the kids are having such a good time. I'm glad. Yeah, me too. Anyway, about the next PTA meeting, they were one of those families. When it was time for the birthday cake, everything changed. Vicky held me in her manicured hands. The softness of her skin made me hotter by the second. I never thought about making fire before, but with Vicky, I felt safe. I didn't want to give up my fire so quickly, but when she serenaded me with happy birthday, I knew I'd give in. And then she did it. She spun my spark wheel. Fire spat out of me with an insuppressible passion. I might be just a generic no-name brand lighter, but on that day felt like a Zippo.
Thank thank you so much, and you do a great job with that. So we're going to move on to memoir now. This also was written by an author who couldn't be here tonight, but she has a friend who just happens to be an actress who's going to fill in for her and read, which we're very grateful for. So I'm going to read the author's bio first. Carol Schlanger is a working actress, former TV writer, award-winning playwright, and spoken word performer. She's an artist in residence for the Jewish Women's Theater in Los Angeles and a Humanitas and Obie nominee. Her one-woman play, Mouth to Mouth, received 2 Los Angeles Dramalogue Critics Awards for both performance and writing. And this excerpt is going to be from her pop culture memoir in progress called Far Out. The hippies were right about everything. So that's Carol, and Alex is going to be reading for her. Alex Elias is a veteran actress with credits on Broadway, off-Broadway, in films, and on many TV series. In fact, she was last seen on Mr. Robot in November, if you're a fan of that show. She's also a playwright and filmmaker, and some of her short films can be seen on YouTube. You just have to search for Alex. She's in a trio called The Food of Love, which performs occasionally around New York City, most recently at Cornelia Street Cafe. So help me welcome Alex Elias. Keep it coming.
I did get a little email from Carol, which I will share with you. Here it says, break a leg, hope you have a great time. I'd send flowers, but I'm too cheap. This is called The Way the Wind Blows and is an excerpt from her memoir, Far Out, The Hippies Were Right About Everything. A struggling actress, in between auditions, I was grabbing a hot dog at Gray's Papaya on West 72nd in Manhattan when David Gilbert recognized me. A driving force in the weather underground, Gilbert was dedicated to overthrowing the U.S. government. He'd seen my performance in The American Pig, a satirical review put on by Yale drama students at a rally. We'd spouted meaningful spoken word, danced and sang Country Joe and the Fishes, Fixin' to Die Rag, 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. Next stop, Vietnam. David loved the show and dubbed my performance Out of Sight. Hell, the guy was a fan. I was amazed he knew who I was because instead of army fatigues and wild Janis Joplin hair, I was dressed for a commercial audition in a neat ponytail and sleeveless sheath. I still had revolutionary consciousness, but I needed cab fare. When I saw David, I plastered my arms to my sides so he couldn't tell that I'd shaved my armpits. It was enough that I was wearing nylons. Then again, David barely resembled his former self. The seedy phantom before me was haggard, disoriented, and frail. I'd been previously impressed, no, mesmerized, by the passion of his rhetoric. But now, his Rasputin eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, his clothes dirty and torn. He smelled of cigarettes and stale sweat. Yet as he lightly grazed my shoulder with tobacco-stained fingers, my mind went blank. The man was hypnotic still. If he'd told me to run in front of a bus or do him in the nearest phone booth, I would have. David, is there anything I can do to help you? Sure thing, give me whatever cash you have on you. I quickly reached into my purse and handed him 2 20s. Thanks, comrade, he said, stuffing the money into his sleeve. The New World Order won't forget you. That was a major relief. Recognition always appealed. Asking for my phone number and address, he drew so close I could see the moth holes covering his shirt. Without hesitation, I wrote the information. He then disappeared into Gray's. Through the store window, I watched him pick a half-eaten bun off someone else's plate and stuff it into his mouth. The next morning, I was taking a shower with my long-haired Texan boyfriend, Clint, whom I'd met when we were both grad students at Yale. As he ran his soapy hands down my leg, the doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said. I was expecting my photographer neighbor with my new headshots. Instead, Standing before me in the same clothes he'd worn the day before was David Gilbert, accompanied by a stunning, dark-haired woman. She was the legendary Bernadine Dorn, whom I immediately recognized from a recent picture in the East Village Other. A law school graduate turned political street fighter, she was the most powerful weather woman of them all. "Hello," I whispered, painfully aware of my liberal puffball status. "Carol, this is Bernadette," David said offhandedly as he gestured toward her. Not so much an introduction as a statement. She raised her eyebrows as if to acknowledge that yes, she was who she was, but even that small amount of information was more than I deserved. David spoke with his back turned away from me. He was tapping the walls to judge their thickness. "We need your place for meetings. It's small, but it'll do." "What do you mean?" I said. "A safe house, that's what. You into it or not?" "A safe house?" I wasn't a safe house sort of person. I was a deep in my heart, I believe we shall overcome, but without an AK-47. Panic blew a hole in my belly. "Oh, I guess, sure." I was saying yes. Beautiful, Bernadine said. She was shorter than me. "Told you she'd be cool," David said. With their bring the war home fury and a lot of hallucinogens, weather people felt that only acts of violence could bring down capitalism. But they needed a meeting place. I wanted everyone to like me. If actor friends asked me to recommend them to my theatrical agent, I did, even if they sucked. If someone needed to crash at my apartment with Mr. Muffy, their not yet spayed tomcat, I let them. But this man, with his serious zap power, was now standing in my sacred place, my Westbeth, a bona fide New York City artist's apartment, subsidized and everything. The newly installed parquet floors and pie-sliced view of the Hudson screamed to me to be at one with my truth. Guys, actually, it might not work out. You see, my mother wouldn't really, I was beating away domestic terrorists with the threat of a 68-year-old woman who just undergone hip replacement surgery and also paid half my rent. God help me. There'll be 8 of us, Bernadine informed me. We'll use the stairs instead of the elevator so as not to attract attention. It's okay. You can't stay while we're here, David added. All weather underground meetings are strictly closed. We don't want you to know who we are or what we're saying. I don't want to know either. If I never see another weatherman, it'll be too soon. There, I'd said it. But David continued without missing a beat. We'll be here tomorrow and leave it early tomorrow and leave it dusk. Make an extra key and stock the fridge. No junk food, just basics. I was gonna feed them too? Oh, it was a wonder I didn't ask what kind of dressing they wanted on their salad. I hated their violence, but I couldn't bring myself to stand firm and tell them to leave. I was a deer caught in the headlights, paralyzed by my bourgeois guilt. I shivered, thinking what plans they might concoct in my sweet little home. It had barely been a month since 3 weathermen in their 20s were assembling a bomb in a townhouse in Greenwich Village, and one of them accidentally put the wrong wires together and boom! Nothing remained except bones, teeth, and one fingertip. Steam from the bathroom floated towards me and brought with it the smell of Zest soap and peppermint toothpaste. Clint had finished his shower. An oversized bath towel imprinted with a Zuni pottery design that I'd bought at Bloomingdale's annual white sale was secured around his waist. Water dripped from his long chestnut hair down onto his shoulders. He'd overheard us. "You're not meeting here, so just go," he told David calmly. "No way, brother. We were just promised we could." Before David could say another word, Clint lifted David up by the back of his shirt and dragged him to the door. Before Yale, he'd spent 7 years in the Naval Air Force, where he learned how to follow through with quick decisions. In old snapshots, he was a clean-cut, uniformed young man with a square chin and broad shoulders. "Go on," Clint demanded. "Just get." With one hand, he opened my front door and the other pushed David into the hallway. Clint then turned his attention towards Bernadine. "Don't you dare touch me," she growled and stomped out of my apartment. "Fuck you, co-opted yailing pigs," David screamed as they walked away from my apartment where the wind took them in another direction. Clint and I stood in the doorway. He wasn't even breathing hard. "Thank you," I whispered. "In Texas, babe, we don't invite the rattler into the barn." "Tell me again why you left," I said. "Didn't care for it much and I wanted to get out any way I could, so I quit football and joined the Navy." "But you love football," I mumbled, nibbling my way across the chewy rim of his ear. "Love to watch it, that's all. It's a blood sport that'll make you into a gladiator." "But couldn't you gotten hurt in the Navy just as easily?" "Yeah, but the Navy was real. If I was going to get all busted up, it had to be for something more than a game. Even if I hadn't been here, you could have handled them all by yourself. You're that strong, I'm sure of it." He might have been sure, but I wasn't. I sank to my knees, but he wasn't having it. "No way," he said, lifting me to my feet. "Really?" I asked. "Really," he answered. "You're more powerful than you know, and I love you for it." And with that, we went at it. But I'm leaving that part out because I get easily sidetracked. And because in a Manhattan moment, a realization came before I did. The fine man in my arms believed in me, but just as far-reaching was the understanding that the far left, whom I'd always thought of to be protecting angels of the people, were as murderous as the far right. The Weather Underground was a nightmare, their fury cannibalizing itself. They didn't care if I lived or died. To them, I wasn't really a human. I was a thing to be used, and it had felt beyond shitty. We were in no way related. Hardline politics were not for me. I was just a young woman who no longer felt represented by or at home in her own country. Yet sooner than I thought possible, I no longer saw New York as a beautiful, dynamic home for diversity and culture. All I could see were its cracked sidewalks strewn with garbage. The subway, which I took every day, became a clanking crypt filled with the seated dead. The best solution was to drop out of America, with a K, and live freely in nature. Clint agreed. He'd previously visited the Northwest and considered it to be the best place to live on Earth. So deep was his conviction that he left before I did. I missed him like a wildfire misses rain. The end. Postscript. In 1981, David Gilbert was involved in robbing a Brinks armored car, which resulted in the murder of a guard. David is now serving 75 years in prison. His writing collection, No Surrender, Writings from an Anti-Imperialist Political Prisoner, was published during his incarceration. Carol and Clint have been happily married for 45 years. Thank you.
This next piece was our feature essay from the issue this month, and it's written by an author named Kit Bacon-Gressett. I think I'm going to take this out, it's a little easier. So just to let you know a little bit about KB. Spawned by a Southern Baptist creationist and a liberal social worker. Quite a combination. KB Gressett inherited the requisite sense of humor to survive family dinner table debates and the imagination to avoid them.
No.
Yeah, amen. The resulting writing has been published or is forthcoming in Publishers Weekly, Ducts magazine, Not My President, The Anthology of Dissent, The Missing Slate, and many others. KB is a founding editor of writersresist.com, which you should check out. And she also publishes her friends' writing and her own at a site called excusemei'mwriting.com. So this is by KB Gressett. My daughter texts me. She is in love, a deep and sharp love she has nurtured for 3.5 years. It is a love I imagine adorns her library of journals, the older ones bursting with the marks of a high school girl, felt-tipped word art, genital red lips clipped from magazines, and strategically placed, angst-riddled poetry. Youthful infatuation with adulthood, the secrets of this love's emergence. Standing in her abandoned room, I suspect her new journals are filled with the musings of a lyrical college student, bold declarations of fickle intent, brilliant moments of insight, the spatter of salty sorrow. But the old ones, they are everywhere, packed into shopping bags, buried in the closet under piles of gotta have now, yet only once worn clothes. They fill yard sale valises hidden under the bed amid erstwhile treasures. They are secreted behind rows of Shel Silverstein, Madeline Longle, Roald Dahl, Louise Renison, Francesca Leah Bloch, John Steinbeck, Alice Walker, Augustin Burroughs, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Isabella Allende, Paulo Coelho, the latter books recommended by the object of my daughter's love. He is the high school teacher who had thrilled her with his attentions, who touched her heart and her mind. He touched her like she had never been touched before and sent her spirit soaring into an epiphany of self, a miracle of validation. This high school teacher then touched my daughter's hand, the small of her back, her soul. My daughter is in love, a deep and sharp love she has nurtured for 3.5 years. A love she feared I could not understand. How she felt, how she feels, how he makes her feel. This love she has harbored, never shared with me until now. Now she wants me to be joyful for her, with her, to celebrate the consummation of 3.5 years of longing, a longing finally fulfilled. She wants me to accept this love I thought was forsaken. She says if I love her, I won't judge her. If I love her, I'll honor her choice. If I love her, I will love him. The married high school teacher who once touched my daughter and lost his job, who lied to his wife about an insanely obsessed student, who found out by a missent text, has stepped up to proclaim his eternal love for my daughter. What is a mother to do? Be joyful? Celebrate the coupling of my daughter and this man? How can she ask? But why wouldn't she? We adore one another. We curl together through favorite films, scooping Nutella with a shared spoon, recounting stories saved especially for each other, contemplating a more equitable future and laughing at our savored moments until we cry. She texts me when a hot TA winks at her dark beauty, when she first gets high, when a professor acknowledges her brilliance, when she receives a bad grade or a good one, when a friend needs guidance, when she manages to turn her rich brown spiral straight, when she sees the sorrow or the hilarity or the wisdom or the delight in life, when she wants me to help her see it. Why shouldn't I do for her now what I've always done before? I'm happier than I've ever been, she whispers, tracing his name in her arm. And if I love her, I won't judge her. If I love her, I'll honor her choice. If I love her, I will love him. I want to come home, she texts, and I want to bring him. She wants me to love him, and I want him to be trapped by a wide truck in a narrow alley, splattering his parts across the Shakespeare glass, flinging his flattened phallus into the stinking bowels of a dumpster. He deserves it. He deserves the horrors of Bosch's hell for his grotesque violation of my daughter, for the conflict that fills her heart as it threatens to quarter her. He owes me my anger, my foul-mouthed rage. But this I cannot say to my daughter, who wants me close, who wants me to understand what I don't. She cannot grasp the schisms this love has bred, the impossibility of her request. She cannot grasp that I can't love the monster. I want to wrap myself around her, help her see the irreconcilability of her happiness and her wounds. He succumbs to the anguished lust for approval that renders him flaccid and sucks his gonads inward and squeezes his misery to the brims of his eyes. I feel for him. I feel for him as I watch my daughter watch me, noting every hint of my contempt. No matter that I allowed him into my home, she wants proof that he is truly welcome, that he is forgiven, that she can let go the fear of condemnation and find peace between us. She wants me to answer his plea as I would were it hers. But while I feel for him, I hate him. I hate him while I escape to the kitchen and make a cup of chamomile tea to settle his tummy. While I return to the living room and explain the challenges to healthcare reform, while I deride reproductive justice deniers, while I talk with him about the weather. I do this because I love my daughter. Because I love her, I will honor her choice. Because I love her, I will try to love him. Because I love her, I will do anything to insinuate myself between my daughter and her penance. And I succeed. I think I do. I help them move in together, have them over for dinner, accept his Facebook friendship, buy him shirts and socks at the holidays, encourage his career choices, feed his visiting father, never tell my daughter how this feels, and we talk about the weather. We survive, the probability of a storm always on our lips, but we survive. And then one night, he dismisses her with a text. With a fucking text. Now, some years later, my daughter and I curl together with a favorite film, scooping Nutella with a shared spoon, recounting stories saved especially for each other, contemplating a more equitable future, laughing at our savored moments until we cry. We rub Ello into scars long healed, while we giggle about the new recipient of her love. And she writes in her journal of the sweetly silly gift he gave her the other day, the clever way he said a certain mundane thing. That's the end. The bringer of cupcakes, you guys. So she has many talents, obviously, with her and her daughter, I should mention. Is it Bridget? I forget. Sorry?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. I have a daughter named Brigida, so it's sort of similar. So thank you for the wonderful goodies. And Dee, actually, as a kind of a plug, Dee actually turns out to be an editor-in-chief, as I am, or an editor at American Writers Review.
From where he sat, he could see down 49th Street to park. It was not a comfortable perch, the big concrete planter, but it was the only place to sit on the block. On the east side in the 40s, there are no benches. The street encourages you to move along. There had been benches in the west side and in the village, although there, mothers with children glared at him for taking up space. After a while, he would move on, wondering if an old man could become a beloved or at least tolerated fixture anymore, like those when he was a child. Of course, when he was a child, the old men had been older somehow. Until he had gone to high school, the old men were always there, on the steps, in the stores, waiting. At school, there had been the war. He had faint recollections of the years before ration cards and war bonds. Then the war ended. Bang! Suddenly, there were choices to be made. He felt on the brink of something new, something which never materialized, and for which he eventually stopped longing. In a rare stroke of luck, he worked in an office for most of his life. The company, a small import-export firm in Brooklyn, had plodded through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and now 90s, never big enough to feel permanent, never small enough to fail. Diligent and steady, he felt the job become his world, replacing the neighborhood, the old men on the steps. Nothing existed beyond the Gowanus Canal. Mr. Schreiber, the owner, praised his quickness with number. He learned to wear a shirt and tie to work, just like Mr. Schreiber, never switching from long sleeves to short until the boss did. He kept a list of things to do on his desk and carefully checked them off each day. In time, he became the bookkeeper, carefully logging inventory, sales, so many tiny transistor radios in, so many crates of grease out. Eventually, Mr. Schreiber bought a computer. This the bookkeeper did not like so well. For years, he maintained a paper ledger, working late to keep it up. He dreamed of the day when the computer would stall like a cranky horse. Then he would pull out the paper ledger, all the figures clear and complete. Mr. Schreiber would smile at him, gently, gratefully. Mr. Schreiber had 3 children who never cared for the business. Tall, strapping boys, they had all gone on their own. A doctor, an accountant, a stockbroker. The doctor had married his high school sweetheart, Margie, a sassy, smart brunette who waggled a cigarette knowingly as she stood on the corner near the candy store. None of the boys wanted Mr. Schreiber's business, but Margie loved it, learning the ropes from her father-in-law. Some nights, as the bookkeeper hunched over his paper ledger, he would watch Margie staring at boxes, poking the toys, counting dry goods, her fingers in the endless flow of things in and things out. And he wondered if she dreamed of secrets in the boxes and the numbers. Years he worked at Mr. Schreiber's. The old man died, Margie took over, but it was still Mr. Schreiber's in his mind. Vaguely he felt that times were good or bad or somewhere in between, but his own life had no such flows and eddies. After he turned 65, Margie called him into her tiny office and told him that he could collect his pension and Social Security. She smiled gently with Mr. Schreiber's face for a moment, as if she had been the blood daughter. The bookkeeper was confused until he realized that he was supposed to leave now and not come back. At first, he rose each morning, put on his old watch, and waited for activity to occur to him. After a week of sitting at the table until dark, he left the apartment and took the bus to Manhattan. He chose a stop and slipped into the first apartment, where he sat until 4 o'clock. Then he went home. The next day, he found a map in the telephone book. The bus driver explained about transfers and reminded him of his stop. He began carrying pages from the phone book, marking the places he wanted to see, checking them off methodically. Walking slowly, he passed places whose names he recognized: Rockefeller Center, Radio City Music Hall, Central Park, Tiffany's. The Waldorf Astoria was especially wonderful, with its huge lobby, the flowers and fantastic carvings. He almost sat in the cool, dark haven, but it felt odd, so he had gone out a side door. There on 49th Street, he had found the planner. There was a bus stop nearby and a constant stream of tourists, workers, and vagrants. There was no doorman on the side, and no one to notice that he only waited. Red sightseeing buses stopped here too, and once he rode around Manhattan pretending he spoke no English. He found himself returning to the spot. He would never stay too long, a few hours, carefully tracked on the new watch that Margie had given him, which he had finally taken from its box. One day in early October, he stayed longer than usual, past 6. The weather was particularly fine. Crystal air with soft breeze sweeping out the bus roofs. Hired cars swooped in, discharging lovely women and trim men. He marveled that so many men had tuxedos and could tie those little ties. The women passed in beautiful gowns, filling the air with the click of their heels and the scent of their perfume. So rapt was his attention that he almost didn't hear the voice calling his name. "Pete? Pete, is that you?" "Mrs. Schreiber." He slid from the perch, brushing the back of his pants. Margie was wearing a long black dress. Brilliant red toenails peeked from beneath. In all the years they had worked together, the bookkeeper had never seen her toes or noticed the golden glint in her hair. "Please, Pete, call me Margie. We're not at the business now." For a moment they simply looked at each other, trying to pull their next sentences from the other's face. Abruptly, she kissed his cheek. "I've missed you. How's Dr. Schreiber?" Laughing, she shook her head. "I divorced that bastard 15 years ago. He was cheating on me with any skirt that flipped. Groping the girl's French teacher was the last straw." Girls? Had there been children? Margie continued. "Tonight my younger daughter is being honored. She left Wall Street 3 years ago to work with battered women." "Oh." Margie chirped about her dress, how old it was, how little she wore it, and her silly shoes. Her chest was bright, enlivening twilight. He lost the need for words after a few sentences, secure in the melody of her voice. He began to feel the stirrings of something he could not name. For the first time since the end of the war, he felt the expectant blush of something unknown. Could the new be upon him at last? So absorbed was the bookkeeper in his expectations, he did not realize that Margie had stopped speaking. When she touched his arm, the moment washed warmly over him. "Pete, are you all right?" "I was just listening." Margie laughed again, not so brightly. My older daughter used to say that when we caught her daydreaming. He forced himself to laugh too, although he feared that it would tear the delicate fabric that surrounded them. "Is she here too?" Abruptly the moment shredded, leaving only the gap between anger and tears. "My older daughter is dead. Her husband killed her." The bookkeeper choked back a gasp. "Yeah, I remember now," he wanted to shout. Not so very long ago, late, only the two of them, the bookkeeper tending his paper ledger, Margie counting boxes, tears streaming down her cheeks, slapping the walls of cardboard so violently that the tower shook. 10, 20, she shouted, her rage assaulting the tablecloths and bed linens, rising up against the stuffed animals as if they had created her pain. But he would not claim it, not then or ever. How had I forgotten that, he wondered. Margie calmed down, as if she too remembered that night. She reached for his hand. "It's all right, Pete. I know you forget sometimes." With that, she picked up the handbag she had left on the planter, his planter, and said goodbye. He watched as she passed through the brass and glass doors up the carpeted stairs. He watched until she was out of sight. She did not turn around. As he stood, he tried to pull back the feeling that had passed, the floating, happy moment that his careless question had ruined. He wanted it back, a pinpoint of happiness spreading like an ink stain on a white shirt. He wanted its promise. If the new were not here, could it be on its way? He would come back tomorrow, he decided, to wait for Margie. He would ask her how the party had gone, and he would compliment her on her dress. He wouldn't forget. Yeah, that's right. He would remember to compliment her on her dress. Thank you.
That was great. I think that's why I really love reading. I mean, it's so wonderful to have performers come out, but it's also nice to hear it from the author's voice too. Something very heartfelt about that, Dee. Thank you so much to all of our readers and performers, and for coming out in the cold. We're going to be here next next month, which is February 10th. It'll be a Saturday, and it will be all essays themed. that our essays editor is going to be running that, so we hope to see you back perhaps. And in the meantime, have a great night, and let's give one last round of applause.
Дом мой достроен, но я в нем один. Хлопнула дверь за спиной. Ветер осенний стучится в окно, плачет опять надо мной. Ночью гроза, а на утро туман. Солнце остыло совсем.